Hi, welcome to this video on rates, ratios, and unit rates. So we are going to be filling in this note sheet together and doing a couple examples. So let's first start with ratio. So a ratio is, and here is the definition that you will write down in the little box here, a comparison of two numbers. Ratios can be part to part or part to whole. So a part to part comparison would be like boys to girls or cups of flour to cups of milk, whereas a part to whole comparison would be like cups, like boys comparison to the whole class, or something to that effect. Now, a part to whole comparison, a part to whole ratio has another name. It's called a fraction. So a fraction is an example of a ratio. So we have a couple examples over here of ratios that we're going to write. And so one is the recipe calls for 3 cups of flour and 2 cups of milk. So what is the ratio of milk to flour? And so since milk comes first, then when I write the ratio, I can say 3 to 2, or I can write it as 3 to 2 like this. I can write a ratio like that, or I can write 3 and then ... 2. So those are all ways to write that ratio. Or if I have the ratio of there are 12 boys and 10 girls in a math class, what's the ratio of girls to total? So now I'm really writing a part to whole comparison because total is my second number. And so I'm really writing a fraction. So that means this would be 10 girls out of 22 total. And I got that because I added these two together to get the total. Or I can even write 10 to 22. But normally when we write a ratio of a part to total comparison, we write it as a fraction. This can be simplified. I can find the common factor and simplify this ratio to get 5 to 11. So next we have rates. So a rate is kind of like a ratio, except because it's also a comparison of two numbers, except this time they have different labels. So in a ratio, the things that are in comparison typically have a common label, or they don't have to, but they could have a common label. But a rate, there's going to be two different labels. So for example, Joey traveled 150 miles in 3 hours. Well, I could write that as a rate as Joey traveled 150 miles per 3 hours. So that would be a rate, either it as a rate the way it is now. So Terry bought 4 oranges for $2.25. That's a rate because it's really comparing two things, oranges and money, and they're two different labels. So that's what makes it a rate. But we're going to take those rates and make them unit rates. And so that's our last thing to look at. So our last definition is a unit rate. And a unit rate is a rate where one of the numbers being compared is 1. So for example, we have 5 bags of chips for $3.25. Well, really, that can be written as, I can find the price per bag. So I have the dollars, and I would say that that's how much it costs. But I would want to find out how much it costs for 1, so for 5 bags. So that's a rate, dollars for bags. But I want to know how much it costs for 1 bag. So the price it is for 1 bag, that's going to be the unit rate. The same thing with 8 people sharing cupcakes. Well, I can either figure out the number of cupcakes, number of people per cupcake, or I can figure out what I really want to know is, well, how many cupcakes are there per person? So I would take the cupcakes and over the number of people. Now I've made it a rate. And if I wanted a unit rate, I would find, well, how many cupcakes for 1 person? Because that's really what I want to know. How much does everybody get? And then I can see that, I can simplify this because 16 to 8 is the same thing as 2 to 1. So that's 2 cupcakes per person. So a rate can be made into a unit rate when you make one of the numbers 1. So a car is traveling 160 miles in 4 hours. Well, that's a rate, 160 miles in 4 hours. The unit rate would be how many hours would it take to go 1 mile? I could do that, but really I'd probably want to know, well, how many miles per hour, because that's a more common unit rate you'd see. And so 160 miles in 4 hours is the same as 40 miles per hour. There are some strategies for finding that unit rate, which we'll be discussing in class. So those are the notes on ratios, rates, and unit rates. Thanks.